Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker-Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hi, I'm Becky Parker-Geist. I am the host of the Audiobook Connection podcast, Behind the Scenes with the Creative Teams. I am also president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association and the CEO of Pro Audio Voices, providing top-quality experiences in audiobook and podcasting, production, distribution, and marketing. And I am super excited to have with me today Sheldon Collins, author of The Legend of Valentine, an ancient historical love story. Sheldon, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here with you today.
Yeah. So we would love to hear a little bit more about you, your background, and what inspired you, I'm going to say, to be a storyteller, because I know you have a history that goes well beyond this book here. So what got you started in being a storyteller?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for me to be able to be on the show today. And it's been such a pleasure working with you in these last few months. Going back to storytelling, it really goes back, way back. I think that a lot of us who are storytellers, we start pretty young. We start doodling on journals or wherever we can to, whether it's a notebook or, way back in the 90s, it was a old laptop. And I remember sitting down and trying to write my first novel when I was 24, 25 years old. So it's been a long time coming. From there, it evolved to learning how to write screenplays and then having a career as a screenwriter. And then I got my master's in directing film. So it was the storytelling, arm just stretched into another medium. And it was really a lot of fun. For years, I was writing scripts, directing independent films. That led into commercials at some point. And so I had a quite a big stretch as an independent indie filmmaker, we would say. And then at a certain point, I took a pause from that because the life of a indie filmmaker became quite a big struggle with trying to juggle that and a family. And I got out of the industry for a bit. And I was excited to get back into it because that creative itch really gnaws at us when we step too far away from it, right?
It does. It really does. It's like there's something wrong in my life, but what is that? Yes.
So I tried to use my creative outlets with marketing and stuff like that when I started when I worked in another industry, and that does work. I know a lot of us creatives, when we kind of give up on the real passion projects, we try to find other outlets, and it does work to find other outlets and creativity. But I was very fortunate to be able to circle back and pick up as a writer, storyteller in the last year with this project. So I took a big step away from being a storyteller for almost a decade and, worked and used that creative outlet in other areas. But it really goes way, way back to in my 20s when I started writing a novel at that time that thankfully did not get published.
Yeah.
So I got that one out of my system. I think that, a lot of us were like, thankfully it wasn't this one because, we invested, as a lot into making this wonderful audiobook that I know we'll talk about today. But, I think a lot of writers, storytellers, we have to sit down and we have to get that somewhat autobiographical story out of our system. And then we go through a bunch of training and we learn, a lot of different things about the industry. And we try different projects and get closer to hopefully landing on a story that really resonates with our either listeners or readers or whatever platform they watched in, or an audience of in the film industry, it would be viewers. So yeah, it's been a long time coming, and it started really several decades ago when I first sat down and started falling in love with storytelling in my 20s, and I was and that's when it really started for me.
Yeah. And so after that kind of semi-hiatus, I'll call it semi since I know you were being creative during that time, but was there an event, something that happened that brought you back into full-on storytelling?
I mean, I think it's this story. I think it's the Legend of Valentine. I spent a tremendous amount of time with this actual story back in, I guess it would be almost 2000, between 2006 and 2012. And this story was originally brought to me from a friend of mine. His name is Lee Holden, and hopefully we'll get him on the show here one of these weeks because he's such a phenomenal guy. He's a world-renowned healer, and he was scouring the internet and identified this amazing legend of Saint Valentine in various different iterations that had been passed along for almost 2,000 years now. And that attracted him as a healer, as he has Holden Qigong. He's really has gotten into this Qigong healing, and he's helped thousands of people and lectures and all this kind of stuff. And so he wasn't a storyteller per se. He also just kind of fell in love with Valentine's story. And so he decided to give a stab at it in terms of writing the screenplay. And he brought that to me, and the idea was there. And so just a tremendous amount of development had to take place in terms of really bringing all the historical accuracy to it and fleshing out all the characters and stories. But he first kind of set the wheels in motion. And so I bought the rights to the story along with a writing partner at the time. And we went through a lot of development with the story, turning it into a much further developed screenplay that we eventually brought it out to the industry, and it got a lot of attention. I mean, it was, it got the Paramount Studios was interested in it at that time, and Robert Evans wanted to actually produce it as his swan song. And it's unfortunate that we didn't quite get it, produced, but we got so close. We had a huge director, and then he dropped out of it. So it was one of those things that I put so much work at that time into developing Lee's screenplay. And I got so close, along with my collaborators at the time, to getting it made that it just always bugged at me that I was like, this is the story I want to go back and get out to the world. So, and I knew we had so much, even Paramount was like, gosh, this has so much marketing viability, and so many people who read it really fell in love with the screenplay. So it was kind of one of those projects that I had an itch for telling and making sure that kind of we got it out to the world. And so it only made sense to then pick this story as the story that I would start in terms of being an author and, in this medium now versus screenwriting, and, kind of circle back to writing a novel that I hadn't done since my experience in 1995. So
yeah,
I finally got a shot at doing it. And so this was going to be the one that I put all my energy into. So I think to answer your question, the story really pulled me back to the craft and wanting to, really explore writing it as a novel.
Yeah, it is a powerful story. So I can understand that. It's got so much that is just pulls at our heartstrings. You mentioned that you knew it needed development and, historical accuracy. How did you approach that research, and what were some of your most valuable sources in that process?
It's really interesting writing a historical fiction. The first novel that I ever took a stab at writing was just a contemporary fiction novel. It wasn't set in the past. There wasn't, all the research to write that novel wasn't required because I kind of lived most of it. And so there was minimal amount of research. But when you really start to write a historical fiction, well, let's just start from a historical fiction screenplay first. So the first is we actually wrote I wrote with the help of another writing partner at the time, a historical fiction screenplay. And just as a screenwriter, it's a tremendous amount of work that goes into writing a script. And so many scripts are based on historical fiction novels. I think it's like about 52% when I did the research. So that kind of surprised me too. Was, or I guess I should say, it didn't surprise me. It made me more aware now of how much, or rather, why the industry chooses to adapt screenplays from novels. It's because the authors do so much work in their due diligence. And I kind of did it all backwards. I wrote the script first, and my writing partner and I at the time thought we did a lot of research, and we really didn't in comparison to writing the novel. I mean, we did a fair amount, but when I compare that to the amount of research that I ended up doing to write the novel, it barely scratched the surface. And I gained a lot more respect for other authors that are so much farther down this road than I am, who just do tremendous amount of research before they write a novel. And I had to basically do a lot more research when I started writing the novel, but also gather a team of historians together. In particular, I worked with a historian in Italy, and then I also worked with a professor from Emory University in the United States, who was an expert in the 3rd century and Latin studies and so forth. And then the historian I worked with in Italy was a comparative literature scholar and historian. And you start to talk to these people and you just realize how incredibly smart they are, especially as it relates to history. I mean, my approach is just to go into with laser focus in terms of the story that I want to tell, and just try to dig up as much research as I can, and then take that research, bounce it off experts, and then, start to formulate my scenes and my characters and so forth, and try to honor the history as best as I can, and then embellish the other areas that's where the historical fiction part comes into play. And so it was really an eye-opener for me. I took a lot of courses too in the process of kind of making the transition from a screenwriter to an author. I took Ken Follett's master course. I took a few others, Jojo Moyes. I took Lee Childs. I took a bunch of authors who I looked up to. I took their online courses just to kind of study their process, going about, especially Ken Follett, going about, his whole process of writing and research and character development and all this kind of stuff. I studied that as much as I possibly could, and just, mimic the steps. Was, reached out and gathered a team that I thought would really serve this project well. And at the end of the day, it was just the further I got into studying Roman history and the Roman Empire and this era and stuff, the more I realized how important it is to get that research as accurate as possible, but also entertaining, right? You want to be able to tell a story that is entertaining, but you want to also get the history right. So, to answer your question, there are several steps to doing all that, but a big one is to make sure you're working with historians, especially if you're not one yourself, like an expert. Even the historians who are experts in, ancient Rome, you get into the minutia of like, is it the 3rd century or the 4th century that you're an expert on, And I quickly realized that there were, all these different scholars who had expertise in different areas, whether it was, warfare or costume, costumes we see in the entertainment industry, but in, the wardrobe of that time period. So there was quite a lot involved. Months and months of digging through. I had binders full of all this different research that I had collected that really came in the latter part, more the editorial process of writing this novel, after I got what I thought was a pretty well drafted first draft. Then you get everybody just ripping it apart. And that's why, right. So I know you're an author. I'm actually reading your book right now, and I'm enjoying it very much. So I know that you can relate to that whole part of the process where it's like, you think you got it, and then all of a sudden you bring the editorial team in, and you got to roll up your big boy sleeves. So, that's what happens.
All that red pencil.
That's right. Lots of red pencils. Really. So
yeah. Well, did you find that as you were in the process that you were in conflict with any of the, like, from the story that you wanted to tell, or maybe it's the dramatic moment you were trying to create, that it was, did you ever find it was like hard to make it work in the historical accuracy Or was it potentially even helpful to the creating of those dramatic moments? Well, I don't know. Did you have any experiences like that?
I had a lot of experiences like that. I had quite a few experiences like that. So, collaborating with historians, you're the storyteller. And it's like, even one of the things I learned from Ken Follett was that, we got the easy jobs, really. I mean, it's like, the historians do the heavy lifting. They got to know everything that's backwards and forwards and, figuring out how to source all this information from, over 1,000 years ago and getting it accurate and comparing all that information that they compile. And then, so it's interesting, at least my experience with historians was that they would develop this scene that I thought was, pretty magnificent. And then all of a sudden they would come in and they would say, oh, but the Romans didn't do this, or they, they didn't really dance, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do that, and they're good. This was like this crushing moment to this little masterpiece scene that I thought I put together. And it was like, no, that could not have happened because they would not have done this. And so I found it to be a very tug-of-war type experience where it was like, as the storyteller, we're like, oh, but if we have them dancing, it's so fabulous. And the historian would say, but they didn't do that. So you're going to get, so there is a scene actually where I created kind of like an anomaly of this happening, which worked well because there was a reason that it happened because of these characters to get around certain things that I needed to get around to make it all work. So that the historian said, well, if it was kind of out of the norm, then, and you kind of, if you state that in here, you can make it work. So there's certain things that I did, and this is where the embellishing came in, but I actually acknowledged I was doing it so I wouldn't get in trouble with the historical reader. So there, and other areas, we had to cut it. And it's interesting that you're bringing this up. This is a major topic right now because Gladiator 2 just came out. So, when people might hear this recording in the future, but this is very topical right now that Ridley Scott came out with Gladiator 2. And I've been, just reading through all those reviews coming in from all over the world. I think a lot of people have been. And just seeing what, the audience's take is on that story from the perspective of historical accuracy. And you can see in there that film really upset a lot of people that had their radar on in terms of like, was it historically accurate or not? And I won't go into the story for spoilers, but there's some big pitfalls in that film that really upset a lot of the audience. And then there's other audience members who were like, who cares? It was a fantastic spectacle and I was thoroughly entertained and I can overlook those things and blah, blah, blah. So it's a real balance because, what I wanted to do is to actually deliver on a story where you didn't have so much of that debate after you read the story or watch the story. You process it and you're like, okay, I learned a lot historically and it was somewhat educational and it was entertaining. And in other words, it wasn't too heavy-handed on the history that it just became more like a nonfiction novel or nonfiction book rather than a novel. And so I thought about that a lot in writing this and like where that balance is, that I'm accurate, but I'm not too heavy-handed with the history. And so that the reader is really entertained and appreciates the amount of research that went into the story itself.
Yeah, it makes me think about this idea that when we as creators have everything and anything that we want, we don't necessarily get the best product, right?
Right.
The end result. But when we're constrained in certain ways, and in this case, by historical accuracy, that actually we're it's almost like our creativity juices have to turn up, because we have to accommodate the different limitations that we have set for ourselves or that others have set for us. I've always found that to be a really interesting idea that I think is valid. It seems valid to me.
Yeah, it is. So, it is quite a process. I mean, it was phenomenal to go through it all too. I mean, there's times that you're just like, I'm thinking about another author that I'm reading one of their stories right now on how much research they do. But at any rate, I mean, I'm in the middle of all this. It was just like there's certain things that you just fall in love with historically, and you're like, this is so cool. I'll give you an example. One that won't be a spoiler in the story, but one of the settings that I used in the story was this amazing villa called Villa Adriana, and it was somewhat of a summer palace for emperors, and it was just so phenomenal researching that actual palace itself that was created a couple centuries before. And so I literally could have spent 3 or 4 chapters on it, but I realized like, okay, it only serves the story to like talk about it. And then it's one chapter. And, but it's, those are the hard cuts that you got to make when you're writing historical fiction, because you might just fall in love with all this research that you found on this one topic, this place or battle scenes, or, different enemies or whatever. And you want to put so much into it, but really you got to look at like what serves the story best. You don't want to be too heavy handed on the history so that you turn off the reader. So, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun digging up all the research. So,
yeah. Yeah. And also I was in conversation with another author recently about it reminds me in some ways of what you're saying, the idea of like, if you give a name to every single character, the guy who has one line at the cafe, that we get overloaded with this kind of detail that we think we need to track. And I can see how that could happen very easily in providing so much historical background that the story can almost get lost or shadowed in a way by providing all of this rich detail about the history.
It is. I mean, in a lot of areas, I had to pull back on that, because when I went back through it with my editors, it's interesting because in the entertainment, when I was directing films, or even when I direct films, rather, it's, there's moments where it kind of reminds me of like music and sound design, where you get your film done and then you're working in post-production, and the film composer or the sound designer comes in and they just want to throw all their wonderful music and sound design into this thing. And you got to make the tough decision of, where to pull back. So there's like that nice balance. And in novels, it's the same thing. It's, you get all this research in there and you're working with your historian and you pack this all in there. And then all of a sudden you read through it and you go, wait a second, this is starting to sound like a history book and not a novel. Yeah. So it's the same type of process. It's amazing how much overlap there is to and similarities there are between the two. But it was quite an experience.
Well, that seems like the perfect segue. Let's take a short pause, though, and we'll come right back and talk more about the production.
Rome, 268 AD. In an age of tyranny and turmoil, their love will ignite a revolution. Valentine, a once fearsome warrior reborn from the brink of death, sheds his violent past for a new destiny inspired by his blind lover, Agatha. Amidst the ruthless rule of a merciless emperor, Valentine undertakes a clandestine mission to unite lovers in secret ceremonies, defying imperial decrees that threaten to obliterate the Christian faith. As Valentine's covert acts of defiance grow bolder, he challenges the tyrannical order, planting the seeds for a celebration of love that will echo through the ages, becoming the foundation of what we now cherish as Valentine's Day. The Legend of Valentine is an epic tale of love, war, faith, and rebellion. Against the backdrop of an empire in chaos, this gripping saga invites readers into a world where love defies all odds. Heroes rise from the shadows, and the undying spirit of hope shines through the darkest times. Discover the man behind the myth, witness the birth of a legend, and experience a love story so profound it promises to live forever. Are there any limits to what one man will endure for his true love? Get the audiobook now on Amplify Audiobooks.
share a little bit of things that we've talked about, the approaches that we decided from your perspective.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's been such a pleasure co-directing with you on this. I mean, it's a first for me too. I've never actually co-directed anything. I've directed independent films and commercials and TV shows and all sorts of stuff, but I've never co-directed. So it was, I was uncertain coming into it, and I was so excited to have this experience with working with you and collaborating with you, and also just seeing eye to eye with you on so many things has just been so much fun. and I'm just so excited about this audiobook. I mean, that's just it's just it's such another piece to this story that is just so fantastic. And I'm in the middle of, as you know, listening to all the post-production right now. And we just have just incredible talent, don't we? I mean, we do. I mean, it's just, we have 20 different actors in the audiobook, and they're just so phenomenal. And some of them, I hear their voice playing one role, and then they're playing another one, and you can't even believe that it's the same person. I mean, we just have an incredible group of really, really talented voice actors. So going back to the audiobook production, I guess the question is in terms of sound design and adding music and sound design and all that stuff to the audiobook. Yeah. I mean, it, no different than film and television too. It's like, we're kind of looking at that, and we want to put story first, and sound design and music and stuff is important as long as it's layered in, or at least I think what we're feeling is that it's layered. It's not overpowering the story, right? And so there's just so many audiobooks that you do hear. I mean, I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and it's the way it's my primary way that I read is actually listening to audiobooks, because I'm just so busy with my own creative projects and life and so forth, that I find that the time that I have to really process read books is when I'm exercising. So I'll throw an audiobook in when I go for a long bike ride. And so and I can get through books way faster that way. And so I scrutinize audiobooks pretty heavily, because, I'm an avid listener myself. And so I know what I like when I'm listening to audiobooks. And if I'm hearing all this sound design and music and everything like that, I can immediately tell, okay, here we go again.
Yep.
This is either a director or an author or maybe a producer who thought it was a great idea to have this car crashing while they're explaining the car's crashing, and it just completely takes you out of the story. So,
yep.
Now,
totally
and
agree.
mix helps a lot with that too. I mean, it's subtle, but there are certain sounds, and trying to process words and listening to words and sounds at the same time, the brain has a really hard time with that. But if it's done correctly, it can be great. So it is an art form to figure out how to make that work. I mean, in the visual medium, when we do film, you get that extra sensory, right? I mean, you're looking at the screen. So it's like, I see the car crashing, I'm hearing it. Maybe the policeman's talking to somebody else about it crashing. And so it just helps me that I have that extra sensory of being able to see it, to process what's going on, versus with audiobook, you're only hearing it. So it is, I think it's something, as you said, that we're talking a lot about in terms of finalizing the audiobook right now. And it's really important for us to have that. It's all about the listener experience. It's all about at the end of the day, it's not that this design or this music is the coolest music or design that we could have thought of, because I'm sure it will be. It's more about, does it work and serve the project best? And are our listeners going to really appreciate how that comes together when they're listening to it?
Right. Yeah. Being all about serving the story. I think that's so true. It's, I also obviously listen to a lot of audiobooks. And yet I have certainly even heard award-winning audiobooks that I thought, wow, that is way overdone. As a listener, I wouldn't be able to tolerate more than, I couldn't even get through the retail sample, so to give you an idea. But when we know that the story is the thing, that is the main point. That's the point.
Yeah.
all the rest has to support that.
Yeah. And I think doing an ensemble multicast production like this is just so exciting, because I've listened to so many audiobooks that are single narration or, 2-3 characters. And it's just when you have just such a rich cast or a rich voice soundtrack, essentially, with a phenomenal cast like this, where you have distinctly all these different voices coming in, it really is exciting. I mean, and when I tell other friends of mine who are not big audiobook listeners, I just kind of, a lot of people have a hard time just thinking about how that would sound, because they're so used to listening to an audiobook with, one person narrating and stuff. So it really is like a movie in your ears. It's really just an amazing thing when it comes together and it's all done very well and well produced. So it's exciting to be doing this right now.
Yeah. And I want to say also, I thoroughly enjoyed co-directing with you. And I had a feeling early on when we were talking that was going to be the experience, that it was going to be great, But I will be upfront about the fact that the rest of the team who weren't in conversation with you in those early calls were nervous about it. Say, wait, we're going to have the author in the recording sessions. Yeah. Oh no, and then discovering that it turned out to be great.
Yeah.
So
thank you. Yeah. And I think that, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I think what makes me different from other authors producing an audiobook is my directing experience, because when I put my directing hat on, and I've been trained as a director and so forth, suddenly, to me, it's like the words kind of go out the door, and whatever now sounds the best, or when I'm watching it in the case of film, or when an audiobook, when I'm listening to it, if these, like, for example, I'm going through doing a heavy edit right now on the audiobook, and it's like, if the he said, she said attributions after the dialogue don't work because it's already clear from the actor saying it, then we're getting rid of that stuff. Or, it's really like what serves the project best. And I've worked with a lot of writers as a director, and there are a lot of writers I've run across some writers that just, they want to make sure every word they wrote makes that silver screen, or in this case, that audiobook. And that's the part that I would imagine that most of your production team didn't know about me kind of going in. They just assumed, author, And I understand that, because I've thought the same thing sometimes when I direct a film, and I'm like, the writer's showing up. He's not going to be very happy when he just realizes we just cut that whole scene that he was hoping that would make the film. But it really, you have to sit there and go, okay, is the listener going to be bored to death right now or if I add this extra sentence on here, but which is already clear from the way the voiceover actor just delivered it, and if so, yes, cut it. What is you constantly thinking about, the experience for the listener is just critical. And you do it as an author too, when you write the book, and at the very end, you do it as an author going through thinking, what do I need? I mean, I'll get on the author community forums and stuff like that, and their social media forums, and they'll be like, go through your book now and try to chop as much as you can to just, get the story. But all of a sudden, when you take that story that they think is perfect, and then you take it into producing an audiobook or making a film, it's like they kind of forget that there's this whole nother step to the process of like, we're going to cut it again. We're going to show. I know you think you got it right with your copy editor and all your editors and stuff, but no, actually, when it comes to, when we bring it to life, there's a whole nother step to that process to making it as absolutely good, best product as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. We have some publisher clients who are also editors who recognize and are so grateful for all the things that we find that are, like, many times they're just errors, but we find them in the audiobook process, because when you're reading along and you miss a word, you keep stumbling because of the way the sentence is written.
Yep.
That there's typically something wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not typically with the narrator, it's with the sentence, because either a word is missing, or one too many words is there, or they're in the wrong order, or something, to where it's just, we don't talk that way.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I was like these other publishers, I was so incredibly grateful for the fact that we could, I mean, the timing of this was all unbelievable because it all has to line up to Valentine's Day 2025. And, I've been thinking about that deadline for over a year now when I first started writing this story. And it was like, okay, by Valentine's Day 2025, that's it. That's when we're marketing. That's when we're publishing. So everything had to be worked backwards from that, as you know. And it was just really incredible to be able to have this audiobook production land right after literally it cleared from the copy editor's desk, myself working with the copy editor, proofreader, copy editor, proofreader, and then bam, right into production. Literally, I think it was like the same day. We went right into all the sides, all the scenes, getting out to the voiceover talent, and just it was like I laid my pen down and put my director hat on, and I was like, "Here we go." And what was incredible about that was the fact that it then created this whole nother process of checking the story for, like what you just said, a missing word here or something that was clunky, that could have been, worded better. I mean, you don't really get that until it's performed and you hear it. I mean, I did read all the dialogue out aloud, like, authors talk about all the time, but it is very different when you actually get it in this process and voiceover actors are going through it, double checking it. And you guys as producers and directors and everything like that, everybody's going over and over it. And then we're hearing it performed live. It's just this whole nother layer of, proofing that goes on to make sure that the story and the dialogue flow and everything is just firing on all cylinders. And I was so incredibly grateful for that experience because it doesn't work like that all the time. Most of or I would say majority of the time, book comes out, audiobook comes later. So they never have a chance to actually test the book through live production before it came out. So this is unique like that, where we're testing the book, we're getting it just right. And we caught a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't want to say like a whole rewrite or something like that, but we caught probably 30 to 60 words that were changed through the audiobook production based on going through this process and performing it. And then going back to seeing, to updating print before it went to print, which my publisher just loved that. They were like, "Oh, thanks, Sheldon. We have to change another 30 words in the manuscript. How much do I hate
but it
you
will
right
be better."
Now?"
That's amazing. And maybe I think you and I know how those recording sessions ran, what they were like, but our listeners don't. So would you like to share what that was like what that process was like? We have a lot of listeners who are authors considering either full cast or, the audiobook production in any case. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that just first off is that if you have the ability to actually produce an audiobook, whether it's a single narrator, 2 or 3 narrators, or in our case, a full cast, that in itself is just so exciting. So it's what is the process like? I think that for any author to be able to just see their work come alive, and when I mean come alive, I mean performed, obviously, it's incredible because your words are now just jumping off the page, right? So it's like now you get a heartbeat behind your words and you're hearing them come alive the way you envision them. So I think that just from the standpoint of like what it was like as a writer, and I've gone through this process. I'm very fortunate to have gone through this process for many years now as a screenwriter director. I mean, the first time that I ever saw my script come alive was almost 24 years ago when I directed a film. And I'll never forget that experience of having written something and then hearing it performed. So I think that in the first off is just like the fact that you actually got your audiobook made, however you do it, is just such a huge step and a huge thing to be proud of. In terms of how we did it with a multicast, that's just a whole nother level, right? It's just, it's one thing to just send your manuscript off to a single narrator and say, here you go, act out 20 different or 5 different voices or whatever it is and be everybody.
Right. Be all that you can be. All the people you can be.
Throw in Spanish accent, Italian accent, or if it's all in the U.S., a Western, a Southern, or maybe it's just one area. This story in particular really merited doing it with a British accent because of ancient Rome and European. Most of the stories that was kind of important to me, is to just give it that European flair. When somebody's listening to it, just kind of helps to, most of the movies and audiobooks that we hear, to have a British accent is important, because I think most of the audiobook community listeners would agree that kind of helps bring them back to that period of time, that location. So there was a bit of research involved in just figuring that out first. But then as we got into it and we casted everybody up, everybody is casted from all over the world. There, we had actors from UK, from Spain. We had some from India. We had a handful from the US as well. And then we all got together on Zoom. Well, first of all, you guys did a phenomenal job at breaking this whole thing down. I mean, that was kind of, having never done an audiobook production, but worked with people in sound studios, that was really exciting for me to see how you guys broke down the whole manuscript, similar to how producers of mine in the past have broken down a script. And just seeing, you got 100,000 words and 400 pages, and you got all 20 different actors in 6 different countries and all on different time zones. I mean, I was like, how are they going to do? I mean, I kind of got off the call and I was like, all right, well, let them handle that part. I was like, they'll just let me know where to jump on Zoom. And it was remarkable. I mean, you guys, Jerry Lee, oh my God. I mean, the fact that coordinating something like that, and with technology now, could we have done this like 20 years ago? I mean, it must have been, you'd have to do it in a studio, right? So. I mean, it's just with Zoom and the software and all the technology that you guys use to be able to organize this in such a way that you record everybody's tracks separately. They all get on the same time. It's all sent in eventually, and the editors and posts know exactly how to piece it all together. I've just started listening to the rough assembly in the last couple of weeks, and I've just been blown away. I was like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. And it's just, the coordination that goes into doing it like this, because normally what would happen is everybody would get together in a sound studio. So this is all recorded in everybody's home studio, and then we live directed it. That was another thing too, is that you normally don't give, you have voiceover actors, you give them some notes, you listen to them for a little bit, but you kind of let them go do their thing. This was kind of mom and dad were sitting there going, you got to get this right? Because it's like, I would catch a lot of things, and then if I didn't catch it, you're jumping in and catching other things. We were both had our listening for same things and different things. And so these, I want to say these poor voiceover actors, because they were, first of all, they were the best of the best. I mean, we had, I don't know, it might have been hundreds, but we had at least dozens of actors apply, send in their audition sides or whatever it is, their recordings for the characters that we gave them, with a phenomenal casting director that you guys have, Sam. And, so we kind of narrowed it down to the absolute best voiceover talent. And then we were able to do live direction through Zoom with them all getting on Zoom at the same time. And they really, they came so incredibly prepared. I was a little bit worried about that coming from film and TV. I was like, how's it, because I spend a lot of time with actors when I'm directing them on film and TV, like, before rehearsals, talking to them on the side. I wasn't sure how this was all going to work with one actor in India, UK, 5:30 in the morning. I'm sitting trying to direct it all from home. You were telling me before, like, yeah, you got like a few minutes, and I'm like, a few minutes. I'm used to a lot more time than that. So, but it worked. Because this group of talent showed up so incredibly prepared. And then when they actually performed it, between both of our experience, we were so all over them. They had no chance to deliver something that was not authentic. And, that was really incredible and experience just to go through that. And it was also, I appreciate so much having you there as well, because it is a lot. I mean, I think there were 65 characters in this, 400 pages, 100,000 words, all different accents and stuff. Even the best directors aren't catching every single thing. So it was just so awesome to have somebody else to work on this with through the directing it live. And just this process was incredible. And so if anybody has a story that they're passionate about and they want to turn it into a multicast audiobook production, I highly recommend working with pro audio voices, because this has been a phenomenal experience.
Thank you. Yeah, and I will speak for the actors, because I am one myself, and so and I also hear back from the actors who are participating, and I can hear very clearly when we were in the sessions, their enthusiasm for getting it, really landing it the way we were asking them to do it. Like, they could tell when it wasn't quite right. And sometimes they would just, say, wait, let me do that again.
Yeah.
Because they knew they could do it better. Yeah. And it's, if we remember that most of the time audiobook narrators are working all by themselves in their booth, it's a very solo kind of work usually. And, most of us love this experience of being able to be in a scene, reacting off another actor, and playing our character against another character, and being that, really bringing our full actor self to that process. So I think it's just great for everyone who participated.
And what I meant earlier about they had no chance, I meant they had no chance of failing.
Yeah, right. That's right. And that's the other thing too, is it does say, when you're on your own, you're just working on your own, you make mistakes, or you don't do something quite as well as maybe you could have, but you may not realize it in the moment, so a lot of that happens, and we end up with, having to record pickups. And not to say that there won't be any pickups, but we reduce that when we're there, when they're getting directed in the moment, the chances that something is going to get sort of go off the rails in any way is just so minimized.
So minimal, especially when they have two directors.
That's right. Not just one, but two directors.
That's what I meant. Like,
plus
they
Jerry
really
Lee
have no chance of getting it wrong. So.
Yeah, that's right.
And a producer, obviously, Jerry Lee on the call too. So, I mean, it really is an unbelievable audiobook. And also, I've got the all the voiceover actors from the Legend of Valentine audiobook sent in a little clip just introducing who they were, their characters, and I put it up on my website on sheldoncollins.com. So if people want to also see like the little clips from the actors, just in their regular home studio and stuff like that, I've got that all up on the website. So it's fun. It's pretty comical.
Yeah. And we will have, I will be inviting them to join us on a podcast episode. Cool. So I'll invite you to that as well.
Am I invited?
You are invited. Yes. Yeah. I just
Let's get
it's that
together
scheduling thing,
on this director, Sheldon.
I gotta. It's the scheduling thing, like you said. We've got people from all around the world, so we're gonna try and who knows? Maybe we'll do a couple different groupings. We'll see. Yeah. Tell our audience a little bit about what the plan is going forward for Legend of Valentine.
Well, right now, Legend of Valentine, like I said, it's all about post-production. It's also marketing. It's a lot of interviews like this, all leading up to Valentine's Day 2025. I definitely have a book 2 and book 3 in my mind, and I'm not ready to talk about that kind of stuff yet. But that is the idea, is to kind of work towards a trilogy slowly but surely. It only took me, whatever it is, 20 years to get the last one down. So I'm just trying to beat that record. No, I'm hopeful that I can be working towards book 2 pretty soon, but I got around the corner and take off the directing hat first with the audiobook production and all the marketing that is involved right now. So, but good things to come.
Should we be expecting a film version?
Well, with any luck, with a lot of listeners and a lot of readers, that buy the book and buy the audiobook. I am hopeful that one day TV and film will take notice of that. So the screenplay is ready to go, and I definitely have a lot of contacts in the industry, but always could use new ones as well. So hopefully we will see it on the silver screen one day. But a lot of that will depend, honestly, on the listeners out there. I mean, they're the ones, now that we're throwing it out. It's interesting to talk about this for a second. It's like, one of the big reasons I was so excited to write a novel is the fact that you get to get it directly out to a reader market. And screenwriters can relate to this, is that you spend forever writing all these scripts, and the big budget ones like this one was, it's very easy for the studios or a production company to say, sorry, we're not ready to make a $100 million movie right now, and you're not Ridley Scott. So good luck, kid. So, and then your poor little script sits on the shelf forever, collects dust, and nothing happens. When you write a novel, it's fantastic, because if people really gravitate towards your story, it really has a chance to get out there. And then you don't have to worry about studio execs that are making decisions based on algorithms and so forth of whether or not your story will make money. You don't have to worry about all that. The readers are going to make the decision. So I think it's more of a question for the readers and listeners. It's more of like, hey, if you guys like it, don't forget to get on Amazon and Goodreads and put your honest review in, because that's really what starts to make stories like this move, is that people go online, they vote, they rate it, they review it. And if all of a sudden those numbers start to add up, Hollywood and TV film starts to pay attention.
And the full cast audiobook will be available on Amplify Audiobooks, of course, and we encourage you to get it there. And remind our listeners what your website is so they can keep up with you and what's happening.
Absolutely. It's just my first name and last name, sheldoncollins.com. And when you go to that website, you can also see a trailer from the audiobook and the book there. So that's a lot of fun. There's blogs there. Like I said, there's clips from a lot of the, almost all of the voiceover actors are on there, which has been a lot of fun to put those clips together. And so a lot of other stuff that's on the website for information, as well as shop that leads to excellent outlets like Amplify for purchasing audiobook or hardcover or paperback. And we also have special editions. So all sorts of different formats coming out on this book. And next also will be translations too. So I'm working on the Spanish version of Legend of Valentine right now as well.
Awesome. Beautiful. And here on Audiobook Connection, we are looking forward to scheduling an interview with Lee Holden that Sheldon mentioned earlier in the podcast, and also some interviews with the cast members from this project. So,
lots of fun.
All right. Lots of fun to come. So Sheldon Collins, author of Legend of Valentine, and an ancient historical love story. Sheldon, thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.